So yeah, we were just chatting a little bit about how the first episode with Matt has kind of raised a lot of discussion about this, and we've got like in the comment section of the YouTube channel, we've had Harvard psychiatrists like Dr. Chris Palmer and people like very well-known psychiatrists and people in the field starting to talk about this, and we're just saying it's so unusual to see sort of public testimonials from people with bipolar shared by kind of very eminent scientists and researchers. So we're excited about how this is going, and we're excited to speak to you today, Mrrzy. And am I pronouncing that correctly, Mrrzy?
Mrrzy, like the
Mrrzy,
river
sorry.
Mrrzy.
Mrrzy, yes. So Mrrzy had got in touch a few weeks ago through the blog saying that you'd had experience with bipolar disorder and you'd started a ketogenic diet. And how did you come to the ketogenic diet? What kind of led you into this?
I fell into it completely by accident. Um, I was diagnosed bipolar in the 80s, late 80s. I had a major depressive episode with a lot of zoomy, and went for a long time with talk therapy and Surzone, and that didn't work really well. Then I was on Effexor and Seroquel for decades, and that worked great. And every once in a while, I would try to wean myself off just to see if I could go without meds. And in about 2017, I was able to wean myself off successfully and be unmedicated and okay. But then I stopped being okay. And I was on lithium for a while. And then 2018, just somehow my anxiety got completely out of proportion. And I went through months of being absolutely terrified that I would kill myself. It was all I could think about. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to kill myself. I was just, everything I saw made me think of a way that I could kill myself, and I was afraid that I would actually do it. I would see a cute little puppy and think, I wonder if I could choke on it. Just that kind of very suicidal ideation, but I didn't want to die. So I went into the hospital, first hospitalization. I went into a recovery program, a 2-week program that stabilized me, but at the end of 2 weeks, I was still very suicidal. So I went into a locked ward, real psych floor at UVA Hospital, and didn't in the center, in the rehab center kind of place, we were allowed to cook. They just watched the knives very carefully. But in the hospital, we had to order off the cafeteria menu, and I didn't like anything in the cafeteria menu, so I ate nothing but salad for a week and woke up one morning, literally woke up one morning feeling fine. I woke up one morning and I didn't want to die, and I wasn't afraid that I would die, and I said to the doctors, I don't think I'm suicidal anymore, and I was out in an hour because they needed the bed for people who were much sicker. And I thought that I just got better because I was having treatment and intensive, everyday therapy and stuff. And I went back to my normal diet and noticed that the day after I ate carbs, I was emotionally a basket case again. And if I didn't eat carbs, I wasn't. So I asked my psychologist about it, and he said he never heard of such a thing. So I asked my psychiatrist about it, and he said, oh yeah, keto's doing gangbusters for bipolar. You should really look into that. And that was that would have been February, maybe March, 2 years ago. It's almost exactly 2 years ago that I was in the hospital. So I started looking into it. That's where I found your name, Ian. I was looking up research on. I started kind of testing it. I would eat, very low carb for a week or two, be fine. And then I would have spaghetti and kind of watch what happens. Or I would have dessert and watch what happens. And I found that if I ate carbs, complex carbs, bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, the next day, not right away, but the next day, People would say, somebody was mean to me on the internet, instead of just like, oh, what a jerk, and going on with my life. I would lose my temper completely with very mild irritations, but if I ate sweets, the next day I shook. I wasn't labile, but I shook.
Mm-hmm.
So, over several months of experimenting with this. And I now, all my carbs are in the form of chocolate.
Mm.
I eat very low carb food. I eat no bread, no rice, no pasta, no potatoes, nothing in the complex carb department at all. No beans, no chickpeas, no lentils. I've had to give up hummus and just all kinds of things that I adore. It's so worth it. Anytime I start thinking that what I really want is spaghetti, I think about what the next day would be like if I have spaghetti, and I don't crave spaghetti.
Mm.
I do crave bread. I have a very hard time not eating bread. But then after dinner, I can have chocolate. I have a bite of dessert. I have 3 M&Ms. Just something sweet so I don't go nuts on the fact that I can't have anything that I actually want. But I like all the low carb veg, it turns out. I like cabbage. I like cauliflower. I never ate butternut squash. I don't miss the root veg that I never ate anyway. It just so happens that I cook, and all I have to do to eat as much as I want, I have no feeling of being deprived of food. I have a huge salad, and I put nuts on it or something for crunch, but not that big handful of cheese. Um, okay, and I do know that this is working because one of my doctors, my psychiatrist, at one point said that I should remind my liver how to make glycogen, and every once in a while I should have some carbs. So at Thanksgiving this last year, the year before I didn't have to worry because we didn't do Thanksgiving because of the pandemic. Oh yeah, I came out of the hospital and things shut down the following week. So I spent a lot of time at home alone wondering why I wasn't lonely, because keto, man, works great on all of my emotional issues. It's amazing. But this Thanksgiving I ate some pie. I was careful, I only had some pie. But then I went to visit a nephew in Baltimore, and accidentally my hotel was in Little Italy, and I had crab Alfredo and 4 or 5 of those little buns, and went back to Charlottesville, and I thought I was okay, and I was going along and it was okay. Took my car into the shop. So this is the Thursday after Thanksgiving. And I'd completely forgotten that they told me I had to have an empty tank. So they're like, is your tank empty? And I lost it. I'm yelling at them. I'm shouting obscenities, just completely lost my temper, that you should have told me that, when in point of fact, they had told me that and I had forgotten. So I pitched such a fit at my car dealership over something totally minor that I'm not allowed back at that car dealership anymore. The manager called me later that day and said, you can't come back because of how you treated my people while I wasn't there. And I started shouting at him, you're the only person doing your job at that place. It's your job to defend people against people like me when I'm pitching a total fit over nothing. And I mean, I could hear him being horrified over the phone that I was still completely out of my head, basically. So I call my psychiatrist and I say, I had a major episode. And he says, were the cops called? And I said, no. And he said, well then, with the dismissive hand wave, and I felt much better. So yeah, it works dynamite. I have no medication. When I'm well in ketosis, things don't upset me. I still get annoyed. at annoying things, but I don't lose my temper. I still get sad at sad things. I have cried at things that were sad, but I don't cry over nothing. I don't cry over the tiny little thing that should only have bugged me slightly. It's amazingly refreshing.
Mm.
I have equanimity now that I never had as an adult or a teenager or a kid.
That's amazing. So,
It's
I mean,
just I mean, I'm preaching it. Basically, everybody that I know, I'm telling about it. I have joined NAMI. I'm telling the National Association for Mental Health, whatever. I can't remember what it actually stands for. But I'm talking to the people at the homeless shelter here to try to get them to encourage their mentally ill people. Because, I mean, as I understand it, it only works on bipolar. So
so,
it's not good for schizophrenia, for
mm,
example.
well, I
But
mean, sorry.
I would really like to get the word out that this works
Mm,
very well for some people. And
mm.
everybody with bipolar should try it, because I've been unmedicated for 2 years now, and the only time I pitch fits about anything is if I've had carbs the day before.
You know, it's funny, Mrrzy. I remember having really excessive, horrific road rage. And I had it since the age of like 15 when I started driving. And it always got me into trouble. And I had it through 2020. And I remember, I can remember explicit events in the fall of 2020 when I would have road rage. And then I started keto in 2021 and it went away. So I was meditating also. So I'm sure that contributed. But it's amazing you talk about emotional stability and emotional homeostasis, as well as the mood stabilization effects, because I had the exact same experience. Another question I have for you, though. So you mentioned you would eat, you would be eating keto, everything would be fine. Then you would binge on some pasta or some, bread.
Right.
I understand. How long after you resume the diet would you start to feel kind of normal again?
Okay, the Thanksgiving episode was the worst of going off my rocker, if you will, since I went on keto. And that was weeks before I got back on my even keel. I wasn't well again till mid-December, I would say. And that was a Thanksgiving thing. So I had a re-talk with my psychiatrist, and he said, no, you misunderstood me. The glycogen break concept is sometimes you eat some carbs, not you never eat carbs, and then all of a sudden you have a ton.
Mm.
So now what I do, instead of actually, like, what I used to do was every few months I would have pasta Alfredo, or something very carby. And now it's more every few weeks. Like a couple of days ago, we went out to a Middle Eastern restaurant and I had several pieces of pita with my dinner. It was marvelous and it was fine.
The
And I think of it as a glycogen break,
Mm,
and therefore it's not in my head as a cheat week. It's in
mm,
my head as this is actually part of my care. It is part of my diet. It is part
mm.
of my health program to sometimes remind my liver how to make glycogen. And that has also helped with it's not a diet that I'm on that I go off of. It's I don't eat carbs and that's just my life now. I have
Is
no intention of ever going back
mm.
to eating large amounts of spaghetti. I'll go to an Italian restaurant and order seafood fettuccine, hold the fettuccine, because I like the seafood stuff they put on their pasta. I just don't eat the pasta.
It's
And
so
yeah, every once in a
interesting.
while I'll have 2 bites of spaghetti,
It's so
and
interesting.
it's wonderful.
It's so interesting that you notice that difference with diet, because this is not something that's generally considered to be, relevant to a psychiatric condition. It's like, it's all to do with other factors, and food is never really seen as like. But a lot of people say this, that they eat this meal and they felt much
And
worse, and they have
I
this, and
just lucked into it. If I had
yeah,
liked the food in the hospital, I would never have discovered this.
yeah,
Because I
it's
don't think my psychiatrist would have mentioned it to me as a thing until I asked.
mm.
And he was like, oh, yes, I have heard of this. Look into it.
I'm so sorry, Mrrzy. Can I pause the podcast for 1 second?
Absolutely.
I noticed when you put your hand to your face, do you have a filter on your Zoom call? Oh, you do? Okay. I just wanted to know because I was
I
getting
also have
totally
eyebrows.
confused. Oh, you do?
They're
Fantastic. All right,
fainter. But yes,
they
no, because
look great.
I'm non-binary, and so having the
Oh, you are.
mustache. So I like Zoom because Zoom allows me to have the mustache that I
Oh,
so wish I could have in real life.
okay, cool. Sorry, I didn't. I thought it
That's
just.
fine. No.
Yeah, just as long as it's intentional. I just wanted to make sure. I often leave mine on work calls as well, and I come in with like a hat on, and like it's
No, the
funny.
hat's mine.
Yeah. Oh, the hat's real. Okay. Oh, awesome.
The hat is mine.
Oh, I like it. Lovely. It looks great. Okay, cool. I'll go back on. So yeah, so your background, Mrrzy, you have a PhD, don't you? In is it cognitive psychology? Is that correct?
Yes.
And was it the kind of having academic training? Did that help you to have conversations with your psychiatrist
Oh, I'm
around this? Yeah.
sure. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Also, it gave me, coming from a psychology background, I was already in graduate school when I was diagnosed. But I had figured out as an undergrad that if I ever, when taking abnormal 101 or whatever, and you have the medical student thing where you turn the page, oh yeah, I've got that, oh yeah, I've got that. And then we got to bipolar, which was still called manic depression at the time. And I remember just kind of sitting back and going, none of the rest of that is me. That's me. If I ever go off the deep end, I know exactly where I'll go. I did not, I will say, realize when I was having my major episode that I was having a major episode at first. I almost drove in front of a train because I was so stupid with depression that I didn't realize what the flashing red lights and the barricade meant. And I started to drive onto the railroad tracks, and a train went by and missed me by about that much. And my immediate reaction was, this was like, if I'd just been a little quicker, this would all have been over now. And it was that reaction that my intelligence kind of popped its head up and said, that's suicidal ideation. You need to call a hotline. And I went home and called a hotline. And I did not have to drop out of grad school. They were very, very understanding. They were very unfair to my students, I must say, because they let me stay in school and not do any work. So I did not grade any of my students' papers. I did absolutely nothing. I just gave them all B's, and that was fine with the school, which was terrible.
And it's a remarkable achievement to do that whilst having bipolar disorder, I think, because you must have gone through periods where your energy was just completely drained, and then you had periods of productivity.
I always had a very agitated depression.
Okay.
I was never down. I was never so depressed I couldn't get up. I was so depressed I couldn't sit down.
Right. Okay.
I would sit and try to do something, and I would immediately just be up doing something else. I actually have recently read a book called Everybody in This Room Will Someday Be Dead, as part of a book club. And that book, the woman, the main character in the book, really got it. The description of what's going on in her mind and how she can't sit still because she has to go do something else and then something else and then something else. And it was on point. I highly recommend that book to families of people if they want to understand what was going on in my head before I went into the hospital. That is an excellent book for it. But my energy was always high, and that's one of the reasons I didn't realize I was depressed.
So you talked about your depressive episodes. Also, did you experience any hypomania as you were coming?
Yes.
And did the diet have an effect on that as well?
At the time, I went through probably a decade in hypomania when I first started Effexor, because it made me feel so much like me that I didn't realize that was me in hypomania. It just felt so great to not actually be depressed anymore. But I had to have the Seroquel because I did go manic on antidepressants. So they had to be very careful with keeping me here. But I went through probably 10 years. I got thrown out of my in-laws' family. My kids got thrown out of my in-laws' family because of me. probably because of being hypomanic for 10 years, but I just felt great. It felt great. I was having a great time. Now I worry about the hypomania. When I start getting excited about things, I monitor. But I haven't, let me back up about that. I get hypomanic if I eat carbs. I haven't had a full-blown manic episode unless you count that thing at the car dealership. And that was 3 or 4 days after I had eaten the big carbo load. And I think that was, I was going along doing fine because nothing had happened to upset me. And I think if I had had that happen 3 days earlier, if I'd gone into the dealership on the Monday after Thanksgiving when I was still all totally carboed, I would probably have hit somebody. I would probably have been arrested. But it was 4 days later, and all I did was lose my temper. But it took a good couple more weeks before I felt that I was on an even enough keel that when things bothered me, they just bothered me. They didn't distress me terribly.
I think that's a really important point because, you know, we often say on this podcast that keto is not a cure, but it can change someone so significantly that it indicates, you know, there's something different. So if you go back on carbs, you can have these experiences again of being ill. And if you stay off them, you can be well. And so we never say, oh, this is going to just completely cure anyone, but it gives such a strong indication
but it
that there's
does
something
manage
changing.
my symptoms better than anything else. I have
Yeah.
tried Prozac. That was when I had my first really full-blown manic day, was the day I took Prozac. Boy, that was a fun day. That's not happening again. The Effexor Seroquel thing worked for a long time. They had me on Surzone for a while. They had me on Ambien for a while. They had me on Provigil for a while. I've been on all kinds of drugs, and they all made it, well, Surzone especially, I was still depressed, but I was okay. I could handle it.
Mm-hmm.
With Effexor, I didn't feel depressed at all.
Mm-hmm.
But in hindsight, I realized I was actually hypomanic.
Mm-hmm.
And now, without any meds at all, I feel fine most of the time. And when something upsetting happens, I do not have flat affect. I do not have no emotions. When something that would make me angry happens, I'll get mad. I just don't lose my temper and I get over it. I used to have a kind of hamster on the wheel thing where when I went to bed, I couldn't stop thinking about whatever it was that I was thinking about. I've given my hamster a name. I talk to my hamster and that helps him get off the wheel. But frankly, with keto, he just doesn't get on his wheel. I go to bed. If I can't sleep, I can't sleep, but I'm not sitting there thinking the same thought about how I can't sleep or whatever. You know, I'm not asleep yet. Big deal.
The effects of the diet for me too, you know, as you were talking about how you haven't experienced those hypomanic episodes since you started the diet, where I remember that we're entering a time which is hard for me. I guess a lot of bipolars and bipolar 1, especially, where February and March, the equinox and the days are getting longer. It can be a catalyst, and then people go manic. And I was up to 20 milligrams of Zyprexa a couple years ago in March because my body just, you know, the system, the momentum of the system wanted to go manic. And then last year I was on 5 milligrams. I started keto in early January last year, and I was on 5 milligrams straight through March, straight through, no symptoms, February, March, April. And I was just amazed at the change and the stability. And it's something I've never experienced at that time of year. And the power of the intervention, it was amazing. The power of the intervention for me.
It's really nice. It's so just heartwarming. It's cozy, comfy. It's like a flannel shirt in the fall. I mean, it's just, when I look at how I used to be about things, you know, and I look at how I am now, I wish I'd had this as a kid. I have no idea if it would have helped me as much before I actually, went completely off my rocker, but I was very emotionally distressed as a teenager and young adult, and eating a lot of carbs because that's what I like. I ate a lot of rice. I was living in West Africa at the time. I ate a lot of rice.
It's something that people don't realize as well. There's a huge comorbidity between binge eating disorders and bipolar disorder. Like it's very common for people. In fact, we had someone on the podcast called Blaze a couple of episodes ago, and he joined the Stanford trial of ketogenic diet for bipolar disorder. And he had a remarkable turnaround from that, and he had a binge eating disorder at the same time. And when he went on keto, the binge eating went away and his bipolar symptoms largely went away at the same time on keto. And it's just not very well recognized that this is a thing. And it's almost like, you have to wonder whether if the body becomes bad at processing glucose, does it just crave more and more glucose? Because it certainly seems like that with diabetes. You can kind of really crave sugar, even though actually what you need is much less sugar. It's very, difficult cycle to get out of. I wondered, so it's remarkable that you managed to become a doctor whilst dealing with this
Research
growing
psychologist,
up.
not clinical.
Yeah, of course, yeah, by a PhD. And so it's remarkable going through all the trauma of having bipolar growing up, that what drove you to research and to study and to do a PhD even whilst you're going through all that?
Oh, actually, I ended up in psychology by accident too. I went through French school growing up, so you get a bachelor's degree at the end of high school with the baccalaureate. So I was a science major in high school. So when I went to college, I got 2 years of credit for the baccalaureate and ended up studying biology and a lot of linguistics. I was interested in anthropology. And I second majored in psychology because I could get A's in it, and I wasn't getting any A's in biology. Um, and then in grad school, when I started looking at grad schools, I wanted to do biology and linguistics. And I couldn't find a biology department that would let me do linguistics, and I couldn't find a linguistics department that would let me do biology. So I went into psychology so I could do biology and linguistics. And I ended up researching bilingualism and how the brain of somebody who has more than one language in their head, as I do, what am I doing to speak only English now? And it turns out that what you do when a bilingual is using one language, if they are the type of bilingual who grew up with the languages separated by context, the context inhibits the language you can't use. So right now, my French is being turned off. It is not that my English is turned on. There's no activation of the language chosen. There is only inhibition of the language not able to be chosen. So that's what that's what I did for my dissertation.
Interesting.
The clinical aspect of it was entirely irrelevant. It wasn't what I was interested in. I was interested in brain and language.
Okay.
I got a grant to go to Spain and study bilingual aphasics, Catalan Spanish bilingual aphasics, and I was having a great time. And I came back from that trip and got very, 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 very depressed. There was something about coming back to my normal, horrible life when I had been having such a great time in Barcelona. That had a lot to do with me getting so severely depressed the time I did.
I studied classical Latin in college along with music. I studied a lot of Latin. But another question I wanted to ask you is something I did when I started the diet. I was monitoring my ketone levels constantly twice a day, making sure they were, 1 to 2.5 or whatever my range was. Did you ever experiment with that?
I have peed on the keto strips. I got them from my doctor when I first started it, and every once in a while I check to see if I'm in ketosis, but not very regularly because I have an interesting thing, which is when I get back into ketosis after being out of it, I get hot flashes. And at first I thought that was a bug, if you will, that there was a problem with being in keto, but now I've taken it as a feature, and I can tell when I'm in ketosis because I get hot flashes. So I have the strips, but I don't really pee on them.
Have you ever tried the blood testing? The little you can get like a little finger prick device. It's really they're great. They're fantastic. Because I think the sort of urine strips for the first 3 days they give you an indication of ketosis, but then as your body's uptaking the ketones, those levels come down and the blood levels come up. So you can really see over the long term. We must see if we can get you one. We sent one to one of our previous guests, normally in South Africa.
I don't know if I would do that though, because
sure.
I don't really care what my ketone level is as long as I have equanimity.
Absolutely, yeah. If it's if it works, why fix it? Definitely. And sometimes you can be more disciplined with that as a feedback versus the numbers as well. So yeah, that makes sense to me. I think as well, it's remarkable that you can tell just by the way you feel that you are in ketosis.
I think that's a weird little thing that I have not heard from a lot of other people. I've heard that for some women it does hormone stuff. And like if you're younger, it messes with your cycle and stuff. But I'm way past menopause. I haven't had hot flashes in 10 years, but I get hot flashes when I'm going back in ketosis after being out of it.
That's super interesting because
just for like the one day.
Because women with polycystic ovary syndrome, which is a kind of insulin resistance condition, is very highly comorbid with bipolar. So if you have PCOS, you're much higher rates of bipolar and vice versa. And I've seen people on PCOS. I've been researching a bit about PCOS and bipolar, and you can see that they have this reduction of their bipolar symptoms alongside their PCOS. So there's something hormonal that does definitely change when you go on a keto diet, because it's reducing insulin, which is a hormone. So even on that level, it's doing something quite fundamental to hormones. And I was surprised.
At first, I thought of that as a side effect, if you will, but I now just consider it helpful. Because it's not the whole time I'm in ketosis I'm getting hot flashes.
Okay.
It's just as I go back into it, I get hot flashes for a day. And then when I'm in ketosis, I don't. And then I don't when I go out of ketosis. But I can tell whenever I go back in after being out, I can tell when I'm going in because I get hot flashes for a night. I did want to mention the other side effects, if you will, of keto. One of which is occasionally terrific constipation. So I have had to be very careful because you eat a lot more meat, or I've been eating a lot more meat. So I just have to be very careful to remember that if this was a meat-heavy day, then I really need to eat a lot of salad. And again, it's totally handleable through diet. I have not had to, when I was in the hospital and it was very bad, they were giving me medication for it. But since I've been out, that's been fine. It is something that I do have to monitor more than I used to.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's any other drawbacks other than being really annoying in restaurants now. Not so much to the waiters, but to the people I'm eating with.
Did you find it hard when you were first starting to, I think for a lot of people who hear about this diet, it's so restrictive, and so much of the Western diet is composed of carbs and bread and pasta and pizza and what have you, that it's kind of intimidating. And I think for me, it was a little intimidating at the beginning, especially because I live with, a bunch of kids in their 20s and they're eating God knows what carbohydrates all the time. Were you ever
delicious carbohydrates
and delicious carbohydrates, right? Obviously. So was it ever frustrating for you and the restrictive nature of the diet, or not being able to eat what you want?
Early on, but I have no shame, if you will, and I am perfectly willing to bug the waiter and say, I want this item, but I can't have I want the Caesar salad, but no croutons. I want this, but no that. I want this with, I'm When Harry Met Sally, and the dressing on the side, and I've had to get over feeling embarrassed about that. And it's what I have to do. And there's some people that do not like, some of my friends that don't want to go to restaurants with me because I'm annoying that way. But then that's fine. We do other stuff together. And the plate, I have I've lived in Charlottesville since I moved here for grad school and never left. So I have restaurants that I don't feel bad doing that in because they know me. It's the same waiter I've always had. That's all fine. But yeah, it's Well, for example, if I want to eat chicken wings, I have to be careful that they're not battered first. So you're careful. It's restrictive, yeah, but it's within what it's restricted to. I can eat as much as I want. And that for me is very important. I've done terribly dieting when I had to restrict portion size. And because I can have as big a salad as I want with as many, I put a big handful of almonds and pistachios and, all kinds of good stuff in my salad, just no croutons. I don't feel deprived. I'm always full. The only thing I have noticed that's different is that I think about food a lot. It used to be I would just go to the fridge and cook whatever I had, but now I find myself planning my meals. And I think about food the way you read about starving people thinking about food. But that's fine. I think about food. I plan a menu. I eat something delicious, and it has no carbs. I just don't buy bread. I gave away all my spaghetti and couscous and rice to my kids and other people. I still have some lentils just because I can't find anybody who wants them. And I have a jar of tahini I need to get rid of. But within not eating carbs, there is a huge amount of food. And what I do not do the replacements. I do not do zoodles for noodles or cauliflower rice for rice. I just eat cauliflower rice because I like cauliflower that has been riced. But I don't treat it as rice. I just treat it as a veg.
We're in the process of setting up a trial to study ketogenic diet with 25 bipolar patients, and we've been having these. Yes, we have this metabolic psychiatry group that Matt and his family have set up to help people with bipolar disorder to learn about how might keto help and what makes it and what maybe are some of the mechanisms that make it work. And one of the big debates is on what kind of a diet do we deliver, because there's lots of different types of ketogenic diet. There's the modified ketogenic diet, there's the modified Atkins diet, there's the classic ketogenic diet, there's all kinds. What have you found to be most effective? Do you follow a particular kind of diet, or is it does it vary?
I don't think that I'm technically fully on the keto diet because I don't eat that much fat. I'm very low carb, but I'm also fairly high protein, which I don't think I'm supposed to be. I'm not as knowledgeable as I probably should be about the various types of keto diets. I just know that what's working for me right now is not eating any of the vegetables that say they're high in carbs, not eating any carbs that I know are carbs because they're visibly carbs. I've never been a very processed food, pop in the microwave person. I've always been a cook person. My kids used to complain that the fridge only had ingredients in it. It didn't have any food, which is exactly what I used to complain about with my mother. But so it's not as restrictive as all that. I'm sure if I were the type that ate Hot Pockets, I would have a very hard time finding things that I could just stick in the microwave that are keto. But because I cook, it's easy. I don't buy winter squash. I don't buy things that, I don't buy carrots. Yeah. So I don't have to worry about not eating them.
I found a similar solution where for about 8 months, I was really strict and I was monitoring my ketones. But then after a while, and, to this day, the way I eat now is basically just eating a lot of fat, eating protein, and then not eating any bulk carbs. So not eating any potatoes or rice
no potatoes, no rice,
whatever, anything, but small things like salad dressing and, things like that are really small. I find I don't have to worry about now, and I don't have any symptoms come back up. I think I'm kind of doing something similar.
Dressing, so there's no sugar in it.
There you go.
That's because I have a very hard time buying salad dressings that had no sugar, but that's also, I've never liked sugar in my salad dressing. But yeah, no, there's a lot of little things like that that have sugar in them when you're not looking.
Mm.
What I find most difficult is breakfast.
Mm.
Try going out for a breakfast in America.
You gotta have eggs,
You
eggs
know,
and
it's
bacon.
really hard to get bacon and eggs and not toast and waffles and a
Mm.
biscuit and the other stuff.
Mm.
And I like going out for breakfast. I like a Sunday brunch. And I go to a Sunday brunch buffet, and the only thing I can eat on the buffet is the bacon and the eggs. You know, why am I spending $15 on a brunch buffet at that point?
Mm.
But for regular meals, I order the burger without a bun. I order, you know, the salad, hold the croutons.
Mm.
It's fairly easy to do most restaurant food and stay low carb. I
Mm.
am not low fat, but I don't think I'm exactly high fat. I don't glug olive oil all over everything, which, as I understand it, I really should be doing.
Mm.
I have also not stopped losing weight yet. And I went into the hospital weighing over 170. I weigh under 120 now. Or no, I
Wow.
weigh under 130 now.
Wow.
I've lost a pound to 2 pounds a month for almost 2 years now. And at some point, I don't want to keep, I mean, at this point, my doctors say I should stop losing weight.
Mm.
However, I'm not sure how I can stop losing weight and stay on this diet. I may
This is
really have to start eating sticks of butter.
my brother, who's a psychiatrist, had the same experience where he's like, I'm losing so much, you know, people are always trying to lose weight, but he was losing so much that he was actually having to plan ahead to keep weight on. I mean, it's different for different people, but we've even had to put this in the study as a kind of potential risk. You know, it's like a lot of people, unfortunately, with bipolar are overweight and have insulin resistance.
It's great for the weight loss. I mean, I was very
Yeah.
happy to be losing weight so steadily and in such small
Mm.
amounts. You know, but I've gone from a 36 waist pants to a 30 waist pants in 2 years. And it's getting hard for me to actually buy clothes. I actually had to buy dress pants on the internet because the
Mm.
stores here don't make them slim enough for me.
Mm.
I mean, really?
That's
But
amazing.
yeah, that was odd. Um,
I wanted to mention as well what you said, because it really does change your body doing keto. It changes not just your brain, but your whole body starts working metabolically differently. And you said something earlier that struck me where you were like, it's like having a warm blanket on doing keto. And I think Matt said something similar, like it's a real relief to find keto. And I remember that feeling so clearly because there's something very physical about bipolar. People think of it as just an emotional, mental disorder, but there's something that affects your whole body about it.
mhm.
And people, it's not very well recognized, but people with bipolar become, you know, catatonic where they cannot leave their room. Like they physically, I don't think people really understand this very well, but sometimes you just can't leave your house or because there's no energy in your body to do all the things it's supposed to do. And I felt with keto, like what you described, it was like you were out in the cold and it felt uncomfortable. Like there's an uncomfortable feeling about how your body works when you are in a depressive episode with bipolar or a manic episode.
And there's that
And
uncomfortable edge to things that is just
mm,
not there anymore. That just not
mm,
fingernails across the blackboard, but just that background feeling of things
mm.
not being right. You
Oh,
know, that's just gone.
it's amazing.
Things feel normal, you know, in a way that what's normal for me has never been normal for humanity. So it's very atypical for
Mm,
me to feel that this is so normal.
mm,
But I really, really wish I'd had this as a kid, at least as a teenager. If I'd known about this as a teenager, I probably could have saved myself huge
mm.
amounts of distress and heartbreak. But I don't know if we know whether this works on kids.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so glad that you're starting clinical research or that people are starting actual clinical trials.
Well, it's interesting you said that because the epilepsy, the ketogenic diet service that we're using for the trial is an epilepsy service for kids. It's a
Mm,
pediatric epilepsy service. So this is used in most hospitals in the UK to treat pediatric epilepsy. So for 100 years, there's been clinical trials and clinical use of ketogenic diets for kids with epilepsy, and about 50% of kids that do it have their seizures come down by about a half. So it clearly does something profound to the brain that it stops very serious seizures. Even here in Edinburgh, we have a clinic for it where kids will go when they're young and having febrile seizures
mm.
or And so it's very interesting. And actually, our dietitian, that's her main job, has been treating kids with epilepsy. So it's doing something really fundamental to shift the brain. And one of the things I often think about, what is this feeling when you have depression with bipolar? It really feels uncomfortable to exist. And I don't think people understand that, you know, it feels like there's something very wrong in your biology.
It's itchy inside your skin, kind of. It's
Yes.
very uncomfortable.
And I wonder, yeah, and it could be that we can start to understand what that is and what that feeling is and where it comes from. And I wonder whether, to me, it always felt like, it sounds very dramatic, but it really did almost feel like mildly suffocating all the time. Like it really was like a kind of
Oh, yeah,
constant.
that pressure in your chest. Absolutely.
Yes.
The elephant.
People talk about that. It's like a weight that's on your chest, and you feel it. There's nothing you can do to relieve it, and so it becomes. And so when you're in a depressive episode, this just does not go away. And people, I don't think, understand that it's not just feeling sad. It's like your body is in a real crisis of some kind. And I think it's something to do with not having enough energy. I think it's something to do with, like, because they actually studied ketogenic diet for divers. One of the people that's a ketogenic diet expert is Dominic D'Agostino. And when divers run out of oxygen, they start having seizures, and they give them ketogenic diet, and it can actually stop them from having these seizures. But I think it's like in a mild way, like a kind of almost like suffocation or like a lack of energy in the body, but over a very prolonged period of time, caused to the body not generating energy in the mitochondria. So I think that there's something to understand there about it that will also help people to understand what the suffering of being bipolar is like. You know, if we can describe this scientifically, this kind of body feeling as well as the mental states. When you were going through that as a teenager and growing up, do you feel like there's just a clear shift between pre-ketogenic diet and after ketogenic diet where that lifted, or is it kind of less clear cut than that? Was it a kind of gradual transition? Or for me, I very much felt like I've never felt this way before. I've never felt normal before. Was that your experience also, or was it?
I've had things happen that made me feel so much better that the weight slipped off my shoulders and off my chest. Um, but I don't think I realized that I had been depressed. I was just like, oh, this is so much better. Um, and I don't know if I'm unusual in bipolar dumb, but I never have low energy when I'm ill. It's always very zoomy. It's always I can't sleep, not that I can't get out of bed. It's always that I can't sit down or I can't be in my house because I have to be off and doing things, and then I can't get anything done because as soon as I start doing something, I have to go off and do something else, and then I can't get that done because I have to go do the other thing. Um, but what I find with keto, what the one thing that is the most kind of oomphy for me is that I can get mildly upset by things and not, I mean, I've never been the type to be mildly upset. It's always been either fine or awful. And it's just nice to have a middle ground where I can get irritated instead of infuriated, or get mind something without becoming terribly sad about it. I feel that I have a full range of emotions now, whereas I used to only have extremes. I was never just cheerful. I was always, everything is just gloriously wonderful, mad, or terrible. And it's nice that most of the time now things are just fine. And it's refreshing. I know I've used that word before, but it's just so nice to be able to read stuff on the internet and only be slightly irritated by the idiots instead of infuriated by the idiots. It's just so nice.
I found when I started the diet and then when I started to get well, I had this weird experience where I missed the chaos of the hypomania and the instability, and things were a little bit boring. That started to dissipate now that the other things are coming into my life. Did you ever have that where you missed the chaos of when you were out there?
You know, I've been thinking about that. And I mean, no. I mean, I understand that you do. I know a lot of people who do. But in my case, I'm I'm happy. And when I was insanely happy, I mean, I don't know if I would really want to be insanely happy again. I mean, I think I can be overjoyed at things. Trying to think. People are having babies, but I don't think I miss that as much as a lot of people with bipolar do.
It's a
I
hard
know what
one.
you mean by it.
Missing that mania, people go off their meds, medication non-compliant,
Yeah, because
etc.
it's fun to
Yeah.
be manic. But I think I'm still new enough at having equanimity that I'm at this point having way more fun having equanimity. And if I want to be a little manic, I can do that. All I have to do is eat a bowl of spaghetti. And then I will have that for a couple of days. I have not yet wanted to do that, but I'm aware of the fact that I could. And that also might be why I don't miss it so much, is because I know it's there if I want it. All I would have to do is eat a bowl of spaghetti. And the next day, and then go and do something fun. Because if the next day something upset me, then I would be horribly upset. But if I ate a bowl of spaghetti before a day that I went to a winery or something with some friends, I'd probably have a great time at the winery. I'm not willing to risk that.
It's a conversation you often see with bipolar people is, would you change it? Because there is something that, there is some like heightened experience of life that you have. And obviously a lot of artists or poets or, musicians have, it's so destructive in the long run, but there are times when it can like really give you a kind of heightened sense of life that is almost impossible to experience any other way. And
I've had
so,
some great days.
yeah, it's funny that, isn't it, like how you can be so clear on like, I would absolutely cure this if I could, and then sometimes it gives you a little it gives you a little perspective on life that's like that's very, I think it's still, to me it feels quite precious, but I still wouldn't want it, because I know that for my family and for
That's the
people
thing.
that I would still trade it. But like when you look at people like Jeff Buckley or even like Winston Churchill or people in history that have kind of ridden these kind of like higher waves of creativity. And I think even going back to a lot of classical composers like Beethoven were almost certainly manic depressive. And it's a very tricky thing for anyone to understand, that most of those people probably would have wanted to cure themselves. And keto for me, and it sounds like for all of us here, is this switch that you can put on where you can actually feel what it feels like to feel normal or close to normal. And that is such a odd transition, like to be able to flip on and off. Like you said, if I wanted to feel that way, I could flip it on. And you get to feel the difference of like, oh, I was living in a completely different state of physiology, and now I'm in this more normal state. It is very interesting.
I will say that composing music, like people talk about like creativity in these manic episodes and whatnot. I feel calm, creative, focused on keto. Like I've retained all of the creative functional benefits of a manic episode with the stability as well. And I can just work and not be distracted, and my mind is clear. And so, if
And you
people are
can
afraid,
stop when you're tired.
right? If people are afraid they're going to lose the edge of mania, or like, the creativity that comes with that, I don't think that's the case when I'm on the diet.
I
I
don't
think
think
that's
so
something
either.
that's in the function. We talk about creativity and bipolar all the time. I think it's a function of the person, and you'll keep that.
And I'm doing more things. I paint, and I'm doing more art things now than I did before. And I find that I can paint for about an hour and a half, and then I have to stop Whereas it used to be I wouldn't be able to stop because something needed to be added or subtracted or something. And I find that the ability to stop is refreshing also.
Mm.
And that also I can do all the creative stuff, but it doesn't take a hold of me, and I don't keep doing it when I wish I could actually stop. But I can be very creative, yes. Um,
And
and
sleep and recover
sleep,
and then come back.
yes, sleep is great. I try, sometimes I conk out early and then I wake up early, and that's shifted in the hospital. I'd always been a night owl, and now I'm a morning person. And I don't know if that's keto or what, but I
That
was
is
never a morning person before, and now I am.
that is very interesting
And I find
because
that I wake up awake. I just I really would rather stay in bed till 9 than wake up awake at 7. So I have to kind of make myself stay up late. Because if I stay up till midnight, I'll sleep till 7 or 8.
that is
And
very
it used to
yeah.
be that, the hamster on the wheel thing would be keeping me from sleeping, and I had to have something going on to distract me. And now I can lie in bed and wait to go to sleep and just be lying in bed waiting to go to sleep, which is also refreshing.
That is so interesting because a lot of people report that with keto that their circadian rhythm resets. And it's like, what the heck? This is a diet. Why would it affect your circadian rhythm?
Yeah, I don't understand how that happened either, but
Yeah, well, I
there
mean,
you are.
there's a lot of interesting things about that
So I'm still kind of
because
emotionally a night owl in that I really would like to stay up late. It's
yeah,
just my body doesn't do it anymore.
I've actually got a paper coming out about this because the same systems that are disrupted by things like insulin resistance are also things that control circadian rhythm. And so it seems that if you can repair some of the kind of damage that is
Mhm.
done by these, insulin
I
resistance
may
states.
have been naturally a morning person all my life.
Mm, yeah.
And just because of poor diet and bad mind stuff,
Mm,
unable to sleep, which made me think I was a night person.
mm. I was speaking to a professor of psychiatry that I respect very much here in Scotland, and he was saying that he studied a lot of circadian rhythm, and he was saying that what he realized through his research is that bipolar is a disorder of energy. It's not a neurotransmitter. We've always said, oh, this is a neurotransmitter imbalance. And he said, no, it's a disorder of energy. It's when your body is creating energy and not creating energy. It's out of sync with the
That
natural
makes a lot of
rhythms.
sense.
And that's related to diet. So circadian has been such a big part of bipolar research, but I think the diet side is acting on the same mechanisms, and we'll start to figure out how this comes together. But that's really fascinating that you've
So is that
discovered.
actually a common thing
Very
then with
common.
keto, that people become
I've
morning people or night people if they weren't before?
I've heard it a lot. Yeah. I
Okay,
mean,
good, good. I'd
the
rather be
most.
normal
Yeah.
than weird.
Yeah.
Well, also it makes sense to me that it's an energy thing. Your body's running on all this glucose, all these carbs, and then you go into ketosis. You stop eating the carbs. Suddenly, you have all these ketones. Your brain's running on an entirely different source of fuel, and the energy dysfunction. We don't know a ton about how this works, but that could be
Yeah.
how it's resolved. We don't know. It's interesting. We have a lot of research to do, and
Yeah.
I'm so excited for the next 5, 10, 20 years. Like, we're
I'm
going to dig
really
into
looking
this.
forward to
We're going to
data.
see what people find. I mean, I'm so excited about that.
I
And
feel
I'm
like
really glad I had the opportunity to do this. Thank you.
thank you for coming
Because
on.
I've been kind of preaching the gospel as an atheist here, to people generally, but this will be more focused and get more people that I don't actually already know. So
I think you've got an amazing story, and if we can help you share it and put you in touch with people, there's a big kind of movement and people that scientists, researchers, people like yourself that are starting to talk about this. So if we can help you share this story, then
it
we
really
should keep
is
in
the best
touch.
thing since sliced bread. Ha ha ha.
That is very cute. That would be a great biography title. Yeah.
No, I mean, I don't consider myself in remission. I consider myself to have my symptoms under control. I think of myself as someone with bipolar, but whose symptoms are controlled by diet.
Yeah. I think that's the perfect way to put it is, this can be used as, and it can be used alongside medications. And for some people, it does
Yeah, I
put them.
have not needed meds.
Yeah,
It's only been a couple years, but I have not needed meds.
it's incredible.
I'm just, and
Amazing.
I mean, I'd been kind of on less and less medication anyway, but I needed meds for my mood before I went into the hospital. The meds
Yeah.
weren't helping that I was on, but I needed help.
Yeah.
And now all I need to do is be careful what I eat.
Yeah. That's incredible.
And I do have it is an immediate reaction.
Mm.
It is the next day that I'm in trouble if I eat carbs. And this last time when I ate so many more than I had in so long, having had pie and the stuff at Thanksgiving, and then the Italian food and the meat and everything.
Mm.
It was weeks to get back on my completely even keel. But usually I have some spaghetti or something. The next day I have an issue, and then the day after that I'm okay again.
Mm. It's really remarkable. And it sounds like what happens with epilepsy. If you come off the diet, you can start having seizures again within 2 to 3 days of coming off of it. And then they stop again as you come back on. So yeah, we'll start to understand how this works and what things can help people stay in a very stable state over time.
I used to crave, it used to bug me to not be able to have rice. And now just the thought of what it would be like the next day completely stops the craving.
Yeah. Wow.
I look at the rice and I'm like, it's not worth it. And I find myself, I don't actually want it anymore. It's not just that I want it, but I know I can't have it. By now, I've scared myself by being so unstable that it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. I'd much rather just not have the carbs and the way I do it with the chocolate. My carbs come with a little dose of happiness because they're in chocolate.
It's
almost like medication. But I don't, and I can keep chocolate in the house and not eat huge amounts of it. I can eat 3 M&Ms.
Yeah.
At this point, I don't eat M&Ms anymore because there's sugar besides the chocolate.
Yeah.
I buy solid dark chocolate and have a square.
Yeah. And the 3 M, yeah.
Yeah, there was something else I noticed. Somebody in one of the things that I'd been reading from you, one of the websites, somebody mentioned that they could have coffee again. And that is also, I had to give up coffee because it gave me rage, Matt. I'm not usually an angry person, but if I had coffee, I would have rage episodes that were terrifying to me. And so I stopped drinking coffee years ago. And I read on that website that somebody with bipolar is like, ooh, I can have coffee again. I can have coffee again. It's so nice. I don't put sugar in it.
Hey, I love my coffee. Some heavy cream.
It's got to be decaf, but I can have a cup of decaf now and not go crazy. And that is, again, just so nice. There's that warm blanket back.
Have you got into this MCT coffee, bulletproof coffee?
No.
It's ridiculous. It's preposterous, but it's butter in coffee. Butter mixed with kind of coconut oil.
Yes, that's supposed to be very good.
Yeah, I have that every day. It's very good.
My French friends put butter in their coffee.
And I find as well, if you mix in with the butter, it kind of absorbs the caffeine more slowly or something. So it's quite nice. It gives you a kind of stable energy. Yeah, like I find if I drink straight coffee, like I was doing this afternoon, it's it's kind of a bit more of a buzz. But if you have the butter in it, it's very smooth and it's very nice. Now I want to be respectful of your time because we've been going for just more than an hour. Are you okay?
I'm okay.
Okay, cool. So I guess, Matt, did you have any sort of like closing thoughts on or questions?
I'm just so happy anytime I hear a story of someone. I just know how hard this illness is because I've lived it myself, and there's a solution that, like, for me, that has allowed me to live and get a degree, go to school and work and do this normal stuff. And something I like to talk about is how now the problems I have in my life are like normal person problems. I'm thinking about relationships and money and exactly. And so I'm so glad that this has helped you, and it's great to hear your story.
And we're back to the concept of refreshing. Yeah. It's just so nice that my issues are normal now. Yeah. And people understand them. It's not that you have to have this illness to know what I'm talking about. No, the people at the car dealership annoyed me, and everybody can understand that.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's it's so
buy them cookies.
Thank you for sharing. It's so
Yeah, thank you
interesting,
for inviting me on this, and good luck with your work. I would like to be kept in. Send me that paper
definitely, and
when
let's
you
keep in
do it. I would
touch.
very much like to keep it, and I'm sending this to all the people I know too.
And there's a whole community of people researching and getting interested in this, so we should get you connected with people that are talking about it, and hopefully as we understand more, we can help make the diets better, and to just create a community of people, because now that we have real life problems, we need to talk about those as well. So I think going from bipolar to being better has its own challenges. But yeah, thank you for talking to us, and we will we'll be in touch.